When HermitCraft seasons come to an end, the giant mega bases that the hermits spent hundreds of hours building get paused in time.
Like this would be mega with a capital M-E-G-A.
Huge castles, magical theme parks, and even kingdoms go untouched.
Goodbye Peace, Love and Plant statue. Goodbye base. Goodbye Gigabase as a whole.
At least until I came along. This year, I've been giving HermitCraft bases extreme makeovers. I've spent countless hours finishing bases that weren't finished in time, building concepts which never came to life, and even expanding entire groups of bases, like with Botum. To end the year though, I'm going to revisit a bunch of bases and give them the ultimate Christmas makeover. I'm going to reach out to other builders to help me so we can really get through a bunch of bases in this video, and hopefully make this a yearly tradition. As the video goes on, the transformations are going to get bigger and bigger. But first, I want to begin with what is probably the most special base we're going to be working on in this video. That base is of course Scarland. If you're somehow not aware, Scarland was Good Times with Scar's Season 9 megabase, where he basically built Disney World. It includes this huge main street and a grand castle at the end. The best thing about this build though is definitely all of the character that it has. It really feels magical to enter. I've mentioned in the past that I'll never heavily transform or finish the base without permission, as it would feel wrong to do that because of how personal it is to Scar. And so today I'm just going to try and respectfully add some decorations, inspired by how Disney World would decorate their parks to fit Scar's vision. This will all be additions that I think Scar would actually have added to the build. Anyway, let's begin. We're going to start with the castle and then we'll move our way down to the main street after. As I mentioned, I want to make this realistic. Scar spent ages building huge backlots for staff and did his best to make it lifelike, and so I'm going to do the same. I looked at loads of images of how Disney World decorate their castle and entrance street, and will be taking lots of inspiration from that. I don't want to add much to the castle as parks usually wouldn't, apart from one time when Disney World turned their castle into this weird candy castle, but I don't want to ruin the build by doing that. Instead, I went around and added lots of end rods onto the spires, before adding a couple of reefs around the main centerpieces of the build, like the windows. I also added in a couple of bells. You'll be seeing a lot of bells in this video. I experimented with adding a ribbon onto one of the peaks, but very quickly decided to remove it as I did not like how it looked. I then spent about 2 hours covering the entire build in sponge, which if you couldn't guess is a placeholder which will be switching to another block. That block being candles. They don't look amazing from close up, however from far away these will look like Christmas lights, which make the castle look even more magical, especially at nighttime. I really love how these look. I played around with the colours of the candles, starting by experimenting with a red and white colour scheme, before then switching it to a purple, pink and blue gradient, which I think suits Scarland better. But with the exterior done, it's time to move on to the interior, which is going to be a lot of fun. There's currently not much inside of the castle other than an entrance hall and a restaurant. To decorate the hall, I added in loads of bells, more wreaths, a cozy red carpet and some other details like coral on the walls to look like tinsel. I really tried to keep it feeling grand with a very warm feeling inside of it. You still really feel like you've walked into a castle, but at Christmas time. With the main hall done though, I added a big wreath over the entrance to the restaurant, which is named Jelly's Royal Table. For the edit, I once again didn't change much, I just added some of the same details that I'd added in the hall, as well as some other decorations like amethysts and some piglin heads on the tables to make them feel more magical. There are even loads of floating candles which I added to look like magical dust or even snowflakes. I personally think that this is the perfect amount of decorations for Christmas time. Any more is just overdoing it, which we'll do a bit later on in the video for some other bases. And finally for the interior, I decided to add a room in the empty space across the hall. Seeing as this is unused space, I thought it would be realistic for a theme park to set up a temporary event spot here, and so now it's a Santa meet and greet. To make it just like Disney, there's a huge waiting room which you have to wait in, and then at the end of it, a door which leads you into Santa's grotto. You might notice that Santa isn't here though. Don't worry, we'll be fixing that later on, but I'll tell you more about that soon. But yeah, with those edits, the castle is done, and I really like it. If he sees this, I really hope that Scar does too. But now, let's move on to the main street. I started with the circular plaza that's right in front of the castle. This is probably the spot where I changed the least, as it was mostly plants which I don't want to adjust, and the statue of Scar and Jelly in the centre, which I didn't want to touch as I'd probably break something as I have no clue how armor stands work. Moving to the tram though, I made some small adjustments just to make it look more festive, obviously. The street is where I really made some edits though. I started by building a strip of lights and reefs which run along the top of the path, which is one of the main decorations that Disney World uses, as it frames the castle nicely at the end of the street. This whole area is all about sightlines at the end of the day. I then spent a full day going around and adding tons of decorations to the buildings. Most of the decorations were with item frames, which sadly bug out a lot during replays as the frames unload whenever I'm not near them. But I did add lots of baubles in the trees and along some buildings using them, which you can spot a bit later on in the video. I wanted to add enough that it looked festive, but not so much that it would be unrealistic for a theme park to actually add. And on top of that, the original looked so nice that I didn't want to cover it up too much. I wanted to make sure that everything still looked like Scarland. And then finally, the last part of the main street is the entrance plaza, where there are some of the biggest buildings including guest services, where you can start a VIP tour. I put a bit more time into each of these buildings as they're the first ones that you see when you enter the park, so they need to set a good impression for visitors. Please don't get mad at me, but I did remove the flag from the center of the plaza. However, I put it into a box and it's now stored in one of the backstage areas, so it can go back up again in January. I also then relocated 2 trees from the center. I don't like deleting stuff, so I moved them into the forest behind, so they can easily be added back in after Christmas. In their place, I added in the grand Christmas tree. I was originally not going to add one as I didn't want to remove stuff, but it felt needed and there was literally nowhere else that it could go. This is also where Disney World put their tree, so it made the most sense. I covered the tree in gold tinsel and lots of lights and baubles, before linking up some tinsel to the nearby street lamps to link everything together. Finally, I moved out the front of Scarland just to add some light decorations, like baubles in the trees, and then I added a bunch of other smaller decorations all around the park. To really go the extra mile, I even added decorations into the interiors, keeping areas like guest services looking professional but festive, the gift shop looking extremely cozy and like a great place to spend all of your money, and I added a way too big reef that I should probably adjust in the TCG theatre. And with that, the building was all done. I'm so happy with it, especially at night time with all of the lights glowing. It still looks like Scarland, but with an extra level of Christmas magic. However, the Scarland transformation isn't finished yet. There's still something missing. One of the most important parts of Scarland is the life inside of it. There are loads of armor stand people everywhere who tell a story, and so we need to add some more for Christmas. I suck at armor stands and display entities, and so I reached out to a master named Linard, and he very nicely said he'd come along and help out with those. And so I'll come back later to Scarland at the end of the video to show off the finished build, with those important extra details that he's adding.
I love this because each armor stand needs to tell a story. It's what I learned from Cleo. It's like the armor stands need to tell a story just like the builds do.
But for now, I'm going to very quickly go through some other bases which I transformed, before getting to the next big transformation, which is probably Grian's most popular HermitCraft base ever. So let's teleport over to Season 6. And just like that, we're back in 2020. That's probably not a good thing, but at least we're back in HermitCraft Season 7, not Season 6. There were loads of cool builds to Christmasify from this season, but I only chose 2 as I couldn't get it to stop raining. For the sake of Christmas, please just imagine that the rain is snow. The first build I decided to give a very small transformation to was Impulse's Sea Pyramid Mega Base. I wanted the transformation to actually be survival friendly in scale, and so I just switched the water out for ice, changed a few blocks to more festive colours, and added a bunch of candy canes all over, to give the build much more Christmas personality. It's now a candy cane pyramid, which I quite like. Next up, I went over to B-Dubs' castle. Looking around, it's insane just how much he built this season. I thought it looked a lot like a cathedral, and so I used a couple as references, adding jack-o'-lanterns behind the glass to give it a much more warming glow at night, as well as adding a giant wreath and candles all along the roof like Christmas lights. I also covered the area in snow, which might have been a bit overkill. At night time, this build looks insane, which says a lot about the original castle as we didn't really change much at all, but I'm glad we didn't, as this is all it needed to be more festive. And now we're back in Boatum. After I transformed the entire thing earlier this year, I didn't think I'd ever come back. By the way, if you haven't already, please consider checking that series out. I'll leave a link to the playlist in the description. But I really didn't feel like transforming these builds again, and so I asked 2 of my friends to help me out. In the Christmas spirit, I also gave them $100 each just as a thank you for helping. So don't worry, I didn't make them do free labor. My first friend, Clores, gave a really fun transformation to Mumbo's giant armchair base, giving a bit more Christmas cheer to the peace, love and plant statue on the top. I really love this transformation. He did an amazing job. Next to this base is Impulse's giant chocolate factory, which my friend Squeaky Juice turned into Santa's present factory. He really went all out and did an insane job. There are loads of details to see, like the presents all over, the star on top and much more. Finally, I felt a bit left out, and so I made some adjustments to Grian's Midnight Alley, adding some falling snow as well as lots of lights and decorations on the buildings. It comes together really nicely with the ambience of the area. Another friend of mine also transformed one of Gemini Tay's bases, however I'll get to that right after this giant transformation, to give you a bit of a break as I know I've shown you so many builds in a very short time. This giant transformation is of course Grian's Season 7 Mega Mansion. I'm really going to go over the top with this transformation, and I really mean transformation. I'm not just going to be adding small decorations, and instead I'm going to be transforming the entire build to be a giant gingerbread mansion. I specifically chose one of Grian's builds for the final big transformation in this video, as I feel like he's one of the few hermits who would actually be insane enough to completely transform his base at some point, as long as he doesn't have to build the back at least. To start with, I changed up a lot of the blocks to fit the gingerbread theme, switching most blocks to be terracotta, with the outlining pillars being quartz to mimic icing. This is going to be one of those builds where it doesn't look good until it's finished, so please do stick along. I then went along and started cleaning up the build, switching stairs and slabs to switch for new replaced blocks, while also stylizing a few areas with some heads that look like candy, and some candy cane chimneys. There are also a couple of other decorations to fit into the theme, like colourful gumdrop buttons. Luckily for me, the base is symmetrical, and so I could pretty much just build on one side and then copy it over to the other side using WorldEdit, which saved me so much time. The decoration I was most excited to add was on the roof. I planned to cover it in beds as there are so many bed colours in the game, and they look kinda like candy. Unfortunately though, I forgot that beds don't load in when you're a few chunks away from them, and so you couldn't even see them from the ground. And so instead I switched them to carpets, which don't look great but they're better than nothing. While adding these, I also switched the roof to be a bright pink colour, using stripped cherry wood logs. To make the building fit in a bit better, I then moved on to some landscaping. I switched all of the leaves to be cherry blossom leaves, which look kind of like candy floss, before building a couple of lollipop designs to mix in with the trees. I really liked how they turned out and they helped to add a lot of colour. I also switched the grass to be lime concrete. I was going to change the stone too, but thought that would be a bit too far, and so instead I mixed some redstone ores in with it to look like candy rocks. So that the base would look better at night time, I changed some of the windows from being black concrete to instead shroom lights, so that they'd let out a warm light like we did with B-Dubs' castle. But with all of those changes, the exterior was finished. But before I show you it, I want to quickly do some small interior additions. For the main storage room, I added a wreath and a large Christmas tree in the center. I actually found an old tutorial from Grian that he made years ago on how to build Christmas trees, which I decided to follow to keep it in his style as much as possible, before adding a bunch of presents underneath it. I then moved to the upstairs room, which honestly felt pretty festive with the giant fireplace at the back already, but I added some banners as Christmas stockings along it, before changing the pillars to look like candy canes and adding some red tinsel along the inner balconies. And with that, the base was transformed. I think it came together really nicely. It's very vibrant, but that was the goal after all. I'm not sure if it specifically looks like a gingerbread house, however it does look like it's made out of candy, which is close enough. From below though, it still looks very imposing just like the original. I really hope that Grian would like the changes. Linard has just messaged me that he's finished updating Scarland. But before we go and check that out, I want to show you some insane edits that my friend Mchmoo made for Gemini Tay's Season 9 Mega Base. She really went all out and added decorations to the entire base, adding various coloured baubles to the blossom tree, tons of festive leaves and wreaths, not just outside but inside too, and plenty of other fun details. My personal favourite is in the outdoor area, with these Christmas hats on the statues. I think they're a really nice touch. Mchmoo was originally going to post a video showing you the building process for this, but unfortunately she lost the recording files. So please go check out her other videos and make sure to subscribe. I'll leave a link to her channel in the description. And of course, make sure to tell her that I sent you. But now finally, let's go back to Scarland. Linard has definitely been here as there are so many new areas to look at. He's added in hermit carol singers, hot chocolate stands, tons of small various decorations with presents and candy canes, a Santa flying over the park in his sleigh, joined by his reindeers, and so much more. I honestly wasn't expecting him to have done this much. Looking at all of this feels like I've been given my Christmas gifts, as it's so exciting to look around and see the build really be brought to life. You can even now actually see Santa in his grotto, like loads of guests currently are. The build really is magical. Working on this has been such a great time. I really hope that the Hermits can find this video, and that if they do, they enjoy it. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider sharing it with a friend, leaving a like and a comment, and of course subscribing. I spent a very long time on this video, but it was well worth it. I hope you all have an amazing Christmas, and thank you so much for a great 2024. I'll see you next year. Goodbye.